Hi, welcome to Just Out of Curiosity, a podcast that talks about sex and sexuality from the lens of a sex-positive brown woman that has a fascination with alternative or non-conventional lifestyles. My name is Shelly D, and I am that sex-positive brown woman. Over the course of several episodes, I'm excited to dive into topics that titillate my interests and make me ask my guests questions just out of curiosity. And so my curiosity today leads back to sex. I started the season talking about performative sex and pleasurable sex, and now I'm curious about how kink, fetish, and BDSM factor into the equation too. Respect, communication, and consent play such an important role, but how can that affect your partnership and sex life, especially when it feels like we have been put into these traditional gender roles and conditioned to think, feel, and act about ourselves and our partners in a certain way? I can't think of a better way to learn more about this than from talking to someone who works in the sex industry. Lady Azelle is a professional domme based in Toronto. I couldn't be more excited than to pick her brain about how she sees sex and the world, about the shame and stigma surrounding submissive men and working in the sex industry, but also how BDSM and fetish can play a more important role in your sex life than you might think. Hi, Lady Azelle. How are you?
I'm fantastic.
I'm so excited to be doing this in your studio.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's not every day that you get to run into or know or talk to anyone that is a professional dom. Mm-hmm. And I think it's so fascinating what you do. Like as a profession, just even the power dynamics, what you do with someone else in a session, I think is very fascinating. And so professional dom, like what is that for someone who doesn't know or any idea of it?
Yeah, what that means is that my full-time career for the past 10 years has been creating sessions to explore BDSM activities with clients that hire me.
That sounds so much fun.
Yeah.
Not everyone gets to do that.
It can be a lot of fun, for sure.
How hard, like, is it a hard industry to get into? I can imagine it's sex work. Mm-hmm. And establishing yourself, finding the right clients. Like how has that journey been for you over the last 10 years or probably the first 5 years maybe?
Before this, I was working as a social worker, primarily in the field of mental health for about 15 years. That was my first career. That's what I went to school for. And then I went on vacation and I bought a book on Amazon called How to Be a Pro Dom. Oh. Yeah, this is actually the story of how I started, really, like in a nutshell. And I think at that point in my life, I had just gone back to work after my second maternity leave. I was feeling pretty burnt out and pulled in so many directions. And I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit.
Okay.
And so I think I was kind of brainstorming some ideas at that time of, having some flexibility in my schedule and having more control over how much time I spent at home with my family. And so I went on vacation with my partner at that time and purchased this book. And I was on the beach in Dominican and I was flipping through this book. And my first thought was, I can do this. Mm-hmm. I can do better than this. Huh. Yeah. And so at that time, there was a dominatrix in Toronto who had on her website, and let me just clarify, like I really knew nothing about the industry at that time. Okay. I didn't know anyone working in the industry. I didn't even really know what BDSM was.
Oh, okay.
Like not in the way that I do now, that's for sure. So I applied. Yeah. So this pro dom who had been very well established in Toronto, I found her website and she was advertising that she, trained people to become pro doms, mm-hmm. and there was a fee to apply, and I had to send a headshot and a full body shot and a whole little essay like I was applying to university in the United States. And so I did that and I never heard back. And I said, okay, I'm just going to do this on my own. And that's what I did. With the trip to Northbound Leather and one outfit. And I think my first photo shoot was from Groupon. It was. And a few implements from Home Depot. And then a shit ton of workshops to educate myself. And just kind of did like research online and there was, Torture Garden at that time. So they were hosting so many different workshops around, different BDSM activities. And so I just absorbed as much information as I could, and I just went for it.
From buying a book.
Yeah.
What made you buy that book?
So I had just recently, not too long before that, started to explore BDSM in my personal relationship.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and that was kind of new to me, and it was really exciting. And then just the idea that I could do this professionally was incredibly exciting at the time.
Mm-hmm. For those that don't know, BDSM, like BDSM, kink, fetish, like what are these terms?
Yeah, because a lot of people have ideas of what BDSM is, but they don't even necessarily give thought to what does that acronym actually stand for? Yeah. What does it involve? And we have so many ideas of what it is based on the way that BDSM is portrayed in our culture, which isn't necessarily accurate.
Yeah, well, 50 Shades came out and became this whole different ballgame.
Yeah. It's so interesting. So BDSM stands for bondage, discipline, dominant, submissive, sadism, masochism.
So it's a bunch of acronyms together.
It is, exactly. And it's just kind of the umbrella of all the different activities that could fall under that term. And the thing that people don't know about BDSM is it doesn't have to include all of those things that I just said, right? We have this idea of a dominatrix as whips and chains, and it's, inflicting pain to your submissive, but it doesn't have to have the S&M. It could be just bondage. It could be just discipline. It could be just a power exchange.
Could it even be like cleaning? Is that part of it? Because I've heard of people that like come in, clean, do acts of service.
Yep.
And then go.
Yeah, that would be like a domestic
slave,
perhaps, or a submissive who gets pleasure from serving their dominant.
Okay.
And there's lots of different ways to do that.
And then with kink and fetish, is there, I don't know, even I struggle with that, the difference between kink and fetish.
Do you know the difference between kink and fetish?
How
would you explain that, Shelley?
I kind of personally view kinks as a form of perversion, not in a necessarily in a bad way, just a form of of a perversion. And fetish is probably looking into the unknown to get some kind of like thrill or excitement from it. Those are probably not even right.
And I don't know if my definition is even right, right? Because you just read things and you're like, oh, that makes sense. Yeah. So I'm going to just remember that definition for my next podcast. So my definition and what I've read, which kind of makes sense to me, is that, kink is something that's, sexual interests that are not mainstream, vanilla, as we call it.
Yeah.
Whereas a fetish... And so, and kink can be part of being sexually aroused, but it doesn't necessarily need to be part of being sexually aroused. Whereas a fetish is a requirement for sexual arousal.
Oh,
so if someone says, I'm a foot fetishist, chances are they cannot be sexually aroused without feet.
Right.
Does that make sense?
No, it does. I just don't know if people actually know that when they're saying it.
Of course. Well, that goes with a lot of terms that we use when it comes to BDSM, right? And so someone can be kinky or and just want to worship their partner's feet, or that's like an act of service or an act of submission, but it's not required for sexual arousal. A bondage enthusiast, a bondage fetishist, they need bondage to be aroused. So that's kind of the definition that I have read, which makes sense to me.
So there's dominant and then there's submissive. Typically, I'm actually curious, do you deal, like, is it more male clients, female clients, mixture of both?
Mostly male, absolutely. I do see women more frequently as a couple. I work with a lot of couples, especially in the last couple years. And that's something actually that I really, really enjoy and I'm quite passionate about is working with couples. And what I love about that is I feel so honored for a couple to invite me into the relationship. That takes so much communication and trust. And I don't know, I just always feel, and I'm contributing something of value to their relationship. And that's something that I find very fulfilling. Also, what I love about that is when I work with couples, it's usually the session will include a combination of play and education. So it's almost like a really nice balance where I'm able to share, my knowledge and they walk away
so you're
with
almost like
some
a
new
sex
information.
coach
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Kink coach. Yeah, it's true though.
But truthfully, I think a lot of people are very curious about it, but they know nothing about it and they're so intimidated, I think, more than anything. Yeah. And so to have you or to have someone that can actually teach them and teach them the right information. I'm such a fan of sex education. It just needs to be out there more and more. It's like the right people need to be doing it.
Even learning how to negotiate consent.
Yes.
A lot of couples have no idea what that means.
I don't think consent is something that we think about at all unless...
I think we're getting there.
I think it's still, I think nowadays, yes, definitely a lot more.
But definitely not when I was growing up.
Definitely not with me either. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what? I actually, I'm kind of taking this off topic, but I had a memory recently of grade 8 health class where the teacher was, it was just girls, right? Because I think that's the grade where girls and boys are separated, right?
Yeah.
So girls can be told that abstinence, is ideal. And the boys, I don't know what the hell they were learning.
Jerking off is probably
just
great.
Their balls or something. I don't know. And so I remember specifically, the question was to the class, if a boy is touching you in a way that's not comfortable, how do you handle that? Yeah. How do you respond? Right. And some of the answers to that was take his hand and move it somewhere else that is comfortable.
Right.
Don't be alone with a boy in the first place. Like not once was one of the answers say no.
That's so sad.
Right?
Yeah.
And I just had this memory like recently where I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
Like that just explains so much.
It really does, especially from our time.
Exactly, from our time, right?
It's kind of crazy, and I don't mean to cut you off.
No, that's fine.
Like I'm thinking about it when we go to school and there's teachers that we hold in high esteem of what they're supposed to teach us, and they're not giving good information. Yet, if we ask for sex education now, they're like, oh, we're going to create deviance with those kids, and we're going to like take away their innocence. And it's interesting that like you would give good information. Like the people that should be giving information are being told that they can't because they're looked down upon by society. So I just find it really interesting that like as teachers, as like even I guess the more religious you get, the people that are more prudish or more traditional, the way they see things, they're teaching us sex education and consent, but they're not teaching us the right way of doing it.
That's actually a really interesting point.
Yeah, it's growing up too. Like teachers are teaching us things that we should not be doing, but that's how we're being told to live in the world. Which
I feel like that's changing though.
Yes, I agree. It
With
definitely
the next
is changing.
generation, the way that I see, teenagers talking about consent and
I agree.
navigating relationships and their sexuality, it's night and day.
It's
and
so different.
It's incredibly beautiful.
It's interesting to see how that change has come about in the last maybe 20 years.
One generation.
Yeah. That's all it took.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's encouraging. I feel good about that.
It is. But yeah, like going back to this, like being a kink coach and teaching consent to couples that have never been taught to consent.
Right.
It also is just really important because at some point you may not necessarily want to have sex or do something specifically, but you don't know how to say no because you're scared of how the other person's going to respond. So it's also just learning like how to improve your relationship essentially is what that's telling me.
Yeah. And safety too. A lot of people who are doing BDSM at home, like may not be doing it as safely as they should be.
Yeah.
Right. I see that all the time when I'm working with couples. And that's part of the beauty of having BDSM in a relationship, is that it takes so much communication.
Yes.
So much vulnerability, so much self-awareness in order to do it well.
Mm-hmm. Especially if you're doing it with a partner. Like I find
Well,
the partner that I have, I mean, casual partners versus a serious long-term partner.
There's emotional involvement.
Yeah. When I've done it with casual partners, sometimes you walk away and you're like, I didn't necessarily like that, but you may not necessarily say it. But if you're with if you're with a serious long-term partner, it forces you to have those conversations, because I think the first time that you are repressed or angry or like psychologically tormented for whatever reason, it does display with sex or like with vaginal wetness. So I feel like you have to talk more. And I don't think that a lot of vanilla couples do that per se, or feel the need to.
They really don't.
Yeah.
I've had friends and 20-year marriages who were sexually dissatisfied the entire time and never talked about it.
And that's the sad part.
And that's so mind-blowing.
Yeah.
To me. Or if I, encouraged them at the time, well, why don't you have a conversation with him about that? Oh no, I can't do that. So, which is so different. Like, and that's the beauty of BDSM, right?
Yeah. On top of being a pro dom, you also run a studio.
I do.
Is there like, what can happen as a result of renting out a studio, and you provide a lot of like sex toys and play toys?
Well, I'll start by saying that a significant portion of my income comes from studio rentals.
Okay.
So what I have found is that pro doms will either do sessions and sell clips for sale, or they'll do sessions and then have a rental space. It's pretty tough to have a full-time income on sessions alone.
Okay.
In Toronto anyways. I can only speak for what's happening here. It takes a lot. It takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of time in order to do that. So I find most sex workers have an additional income stream. So for me, running a studio, well, first of all, the amount of time that I spend cleaning and doing laundry would probably blow your mind, which is not the idea. We have the stereotype of a dominatrix, I'm going to use that word, of walking around in their velvet robe and their high heel platforms, just having boys doing their bidding and their cleaning. And that is not real life. Not to say that I couldn't have submissive men doing my cleaning and laundry. I absolutely could, and I have, but nothing is for free. Right? If they're giving their energy to clean my studio or do my laundry, there is an expectation of something in return, even if that's just my attention or just my direction and telling them how to do it, because that turns them on to be told how to fold the towels properly. Right. So there's always a give and take. There's always an energy exchange in any kind of, DS relationship. So yeah, it sounds like a great idea. Oh, you could just have like a slave do that for you. Sure, I can. Yeah. Maybe, and there are the good ones where I'll just give them the checklist and ball gag them so they don't talk to me until their checklist is done or what have you, right? But I typically do all my cleaning on my own because I do it better. And that's the thing too, right?
Right. I think
a slave will come in, do the job, expect all your attention and energy until they're a good boy, or give them a little paddling or whatever. And then you have to redo the job after that. And what I have learned with time is it's just not worth it for me. So anyways, running a studio, yes, tons of cleaning, tons of laundry, full-time job. And also, you asked about like implements. I've definitely experienced theft. I have everything in place that I possibly can to ensure liability, as far as having renters' IDs and credit cards for incidentals and legally binding terms of agreement for the rental, all of that. And I do get a lot of fulfillment from having spaces to rent.
Right.
And I rent to a lot of professionals as well, to other pro doms, because having a dungeon, your own dungeon, there's a huge overhead. There's a huge responsibility in that, and not everybody wants to invest. I enjoy being able to offer that to my community here in Toronto. And also for, private rentals are very, very popular too, right? Where couples will rent overnight or rent for the day so that they have a space to play. They may not have the equipment or the implements at home.
Yeah.
And, my studio is just super sexy. And,
it is. I love it.
kind of a great vibe, but not what you would expect stereotypically a dungeon to look like.
Yeah.
Right? Where like dark and cold.
And dark.
And my idea when I was like decorating and designing is like, I want to feel sexy here too. I always say like that my dungeon is my vacation home and my office.
Yeah.
Right. And it's kind of true.
Yeah, it is.
And I want to have a good energy when I'm like, I want to feel good about being in the space, and I'm not going to feel sexy in a cold, damp, dark basement. That's just not sexy for me.
Agreed. Yeah.
Right. So,
to that, like it's your energy and your time. Being a pro dom, like with sessions and with clients, how much of your time? Because I feel like there's this conception that like sex work is, you make so much money.
Easy
Men are
money.
willing to make money. They're willing to give you money, and you can like get all dolled up because that's what you see on TV. Like they'll make a certain amount of money from showing their feet, and then they can go do whatever they want. But I think that's a one-way view of looking at it. From someone who has sessions with clients, how much of your time and energy is put into a session?
So I always say that, being a pro dom, it's a good gig if you can get it.
Right.
Right. Because it is a good gig, and there are perks, and I do get, random e-transfers, and I get gifts, and I get, I already spoke about, the flexibility in my schedule, and the freedom is absolutely phenomenal compared to someone who's working 9 to 5. And I've done that. And then, so the challenges with this job is, the emotional labor required to do this job is something that I would have never anticipated.
Really?
Right?
Yeah.
Navigating the stigma of doing this job. And then, the time. And so when I first started, I invested an incredible amount of time and energy into building my brand, into building my business and educating myself. And, I'm kind of at the point in my career now where I'm very fortunate in that I've stuck it out for a decade. A lot of people don't. I have seen pro doms come and go over the years, right? Because you think it's easy money, and it's kind of like opening a restaurant or any business, I guess. Like, it's not really until like the 2 or 5 year mark where you actually can go on cruise control with it, right?
That's
because
true.
So where I'm at now, and every time I've ever seen a new client, I always approach it with like, this is a potential repeat client. Every new client is a potential repeat client.
Okay.
Right? But I've built that over 10 years. So now I'm in an amazing place where I don't really stress about the end of the month.
Right.
But definitely in the early days, I was, coming and sessioning, going home, making dinner for the kids, having the babysitter come, and then driving back to the studio and doing an evening session. Like, I hustled hard in the beginning. And even now, like you said, there's this idea when people don't give much thought.
No.
Right? To like what it actually looks like as far as like commitment. And it does look easy. Yeah, of course. Neither did I before I started. Yeah, you just think, oh, amazing. She charges whatever, $400 an hour. And she just like drives in and whips and chains and leaves. Right? And she's charging X amount of dollars an hour. She's probably working 40 hours a week. Oh my God, she's rolling in it.
Yeah.
Not realistic.
Right.
At all. So there's so many little things that are part of this job. You know, there is like keeping up with social media, answering email, just like any sales position.
Right.
You're giving your time and energy just to make the sale.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm responding to every email, and not every email is going to follow through with booking and that ending up into, you know, contributing to my income. Mm-hmm. I don't know, this morning at 7 a.m. over tea, I had purchased one of my clients a Sissy Made outfit off of Amazon, and I got the XXL, but it was from China, and there's no way it's going to fit him. So now I have to order a new Sissy Made outfit that's going to arrive by the weekend, right? So like, and it's
what a problem to have.
Well, to be honest, it worked out well because this new Sissy Made outfit is way sluttier, and I'm like, he's so much more excited, and so am I. So it like totally worked out. But this boy needs a Sissy Made outfit for my event on Saturday, and there's the communication and the negotiating the scene with the client prior. There's planning the scene and, you know, giving some thought to the flow of that while keeping in mind the client's interests and limits. Right, which is going to change from client to client. And then I do keep client files because there's no way that I would be able to do a good job at what I do if I didn't do that, right? And then also I always follow up with every client 3 days after just to kind of like check in, because sub drop is a thing, and just kind of offering that aftercare.
I'm so sorry. Just sub drop.
Okay. Sub drop in a nutshell is that when we engage in certain BDSM activities, that's, you know, stereotypical pain play, for example, where I'm flogging somebody or whipping someone or inflicting pain of a different sort. My client's brain, or when you receive pain, your body dumps a bunch of chemicals, just like when you do MDMA or any kind of stimulant, right? Like, and that's the high. That's why people come back for more. That's why, you know, there's that fine line between pain and pleasure, is that you're working with your own natural pharmacy, right?
You're
releasing endorphins, and you're releasing adrenaline and dopamine and serotonin, and your body's feeling good. And that's, you know, that's, we talk about subspace, and that's what subspace is, where we're feeling really good. We're feeling high. We're feeling euphoric. We're having this experience that is very common when you're submitting, when you're receiving BDSM play. And so the flip side of that, you know, same as like MDMA, when you're dumping all of those feel good chemicals in your brain, 3 days later you drop. Right. Where your brain is like, oh, okay.
Yeah, where's the stimulation?
Where's the stimulation? And like, oh, now I have to create my own brain chemicals again. So the same thing happens with pain play or different kinds of BDSM activities. So that's sub drop.
Okay, so
and
then
so you can feel you can feel depressed. You can feel disoriented. There's a lot of different experiences that people can have with sub drop. So I follow up. Right.
Because you would know.
Yeah.
I feel like having a mental health background helps a lot.
Sure. And you know what? A lot of pro-doms do come from human services.
That would make sense. Yeah.
Social services, different humanitarian backgrounds.
I would feel like a good pro-dom or just a good dominant in my opinion is someone who is they are aware of what you're going through without you having to necessarily tell. Like, say if I was your submissive, you could pick up on when I'm feeling slightly uncomfortable.
I'm incredibly intuitive, and it definitely helps me do what I do really well. I think that there's 3 parts to that from my perspective of like how to be successful at doing this. The one part is you do have to be business minded. Right? Because I'm paying taxes, and I'm, like I said, it's sales and marketing.
You're creating a new business.
You're creating a new business. You're an entrepreneur, and everything that, you know, you have to be self-motivated, all that stuff, right? The second part is you have to have the skills. Right. You have to make sure that what you're doing safely and you're doing properly, because your clients' physical and mental well-being is literally in your hands. Yeah. Right? And then the third part of that is the intuition and the ability to build a relationship and to connect and build rapport and create that safe space.
Because anyone can walk through that door.
Anyone could walk, technically.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
within reason, you could be talking to
Absolutely.
anyone. Do you see them face to face at all before you see them for a session?
I don't.
Yeah. So, I mean, in that way, what I mean is like literally anyone can walk through the door. You have no idea what they look like, who they are, what their background or their history is. Not like that
True.
really is a thing, but it can play into a session, I would imagine.
Yeah, you don't know. And not only do you not know the client, you don't know how you're going to vibe with the client.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So even though I've been doing this for so long and I still get not nervous, but there's like a little bit of anxiety before seeing a new client, simply because like I know that I'm good at what I do and I'm always going to offer the best experience possible, but I don't know how I'm going to vibe with them.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what that energy is going to be like, and I'm not going to be the right fit for every client who hires me, right? That's part of their journey and trying to find out what they're looking for.
Yeah, because I would also imagine that anyone for the first time is also nervous with their anxieties too.
Depending on their experience level. But no, and I think even playing with someone new.
Yeah, I think in general,
you're always going to be nervous, but that's part of the hotness, right?
It is
that's part of that's the excitement, I think. Yeah. And I always say, like, it's pretty amazing, and it never ceases to amaze me, that a client will come, they'll walk in the door, within 5 minutes of meeting me, they're naked, they're on their knees or lying face down, they're in bondage, they're like, it's such a vulnerable,
it is,
trusting situation to put yourself, and they don't know me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, I have a great
reputation.
Thank you. I have a great reputation. I have a great online presence. I've done my best with building that brand and being authentic in what I'm doing and how I approach sessions. But like at the end of the day, they don't know me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's true.
So yeah, like I was saying, it takes a lot of courage for couples to invite me into the relationship. It also takes a lot of courage for men to walk in that door and be so vulnerable.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. In the first 5 minutes. Yeah. What a great point to make.
I mean, not always, but I mean, in general, that's kind of the way it flows, right?
Yeah,
like we're on the clock here. Like, let's get our kink on.
So being on the clock, do you ever find that there's an expectation that because a client is paying, like boundaries, I guess, is what I'm trying to look for with you and a client. If someone's paying you for their time, where is that expectation for how far that money takes them?
So the great thing about being a pro dom is that I get to make I shouldn't even say that. All sex workers get to make the rules. Okay. Right? We all get to make the rules for our bodies.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. But I do think that there's a little bit of a difference in clients who are seeing a pro dom and what that expectation might be versus a client who's seeing an escort. All sexual exchange, professional or otherwise, needs to be consensual. I'll say for myself that I do like that I get to make the rules. And I can even be sexy about it.
Yeah.
Right? Like I can be like, don't you dare touch me without permission, or touch me one more time without permission and your hands are cuffed behind your back. Ugh. Right? Like, so to have that power, I'm getting a little turned on. Yeah. I know. It's pretty hot, right? I get it. I hear you.
I'm also like slightly jealous because it's like, I wish I could say that to men. Like, I wish I could say that to people that touch me inappropriately, or like, I would love to adopt that. Yeah.
You can.
I know I can. I just don't think about it.
But we don't.
No.
I know. Maybe you should just like harness that inner.
I need to.
Dominant. Imagine on the subway, touch me one more time.
Oh.
So yeah, I think the cool thing about being a pro dom is I do feel like I'm in control of the session.
Yeah.
And that is the expectation. And I find that my clients, I'm very picky with who I see as well, right?
Okay. Yeah.
My clients kind of already know the expectation of what the exchange is going to look like before they hire me. Not to say that they don't ask for services that I don't offer, or they don't. What I usually tell clients when they do kind of ask me things where I'm like, come on, like I'm a pro dom, like, you know, my brand, this is not my brand. Yeah. And I'll just clarify by saying my brand doesn't necessarily need to be the same as another pro dom's brand. And I'm not placing judgment on, what other professionals do in their scene. That's up to them. But just speaking for myself, someone's like, oh, can you wear a schoolgirl skirt in session, which is just like laughable for me because I'm a very traditional dominant in that, you know, I'm quite conservative in my boundaries.
Okay.
What I say to them is, would you walk up to the queen and ask them this question? If you wouldn't walk up to the queen, like whatever, the queen of the land,
Yeah.
whoever that may be, if you wouldn't walk up to the queen of the land and ask them this question, then don't ask me. That's the way you should be approaching me. That's my brand. That's my personal comfort zone, right?
I love that.
Would you walk up to the queen and be like, oh, can you please wear a short little scroll girl, you know, plaid skirt? No, you wouldn't. Would you walk up to the queen and be like, my queen, can I please have sex? Can you tie me up and have sex with me? You would never say that to the queen.
Yeah. So boundaries. You put your boundaries up ahead of time.
Well, yeah, I feel like my boundaries kind of just like go without saying, but yeah, of course, like in a scene, I'm pretty, I don't really necessarily discuss my boundaries in advance.
Okay. I was just curious if there's like any lines that get blurred sometimes with like, even if with tributes or. Well,
okay. I'm going to tell you one line that can get blurred. So, you know, I was talking about some of the cons of doing this professionally. And one of the cons I would say is just this constantly having men plug you into their fantasies, right? Like plugging you into their...
Like real life fantasies?
Real life fantasies. But also I have had several experiences of men plugging me into relationships that they're creating. Right. So this idea that, you know, because I come to see you once a month for the past 8 years, I'm going to serve you until you're old and gray, and I'm going to be your own slave when you retire, and I'm going to like take care of you and serve you and be your whatever, be your farm boy, live under your stairs, whatever the fantasy may be. Right. And that varies from. So, I have experienced crossing of boundaries when it comes to expectations of the relationship.
Okay.
So when a client is maybe extra generous, buys me gifts or buys me, you know, things off of my wish list, or sends tributes just because they're thinking of me, or, you know, or they're extra, you know, it's not as clear cut where most clients, okay, I'm paying for your time. I'm going to show up. I'm going to have your time. That's the time I paid for. And then I leave. Yeah. And then there's other clients. And to be honest, I've gotten a lot better with this over time. And that's mostly because of where I'm at personally, I would say, in my life at this age, and in my personal relationship, and all those other factors kind of contribute to how boundaries shift and change throughout time. I've definitely had, you know, I've had a client find my personal Facebook and like pictures on my personal, like crossing those boundaries. And then when I called them on it, oh, but I missed you, my lady. Okay, that's a breach of confidentiality, and you should know better. And I'm at a point in my career and in my personal life right now where I don't engage in relationship with clients outside of paid session.
Okay.
Right? I have had owned slaves in the past where that gets blurry.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're giving me money.
Yeah.
They're tributing me for my time.
Yeah.
But then they're also friends and serving me personally.
Right.
Because they're my own slave. And what does that mean? And then when that relationship ends, it ended quite badly because there was expectations of a lifelong commitment.
Yeah.
And even though that's not the way I was necessarily viewing it, that's the way that he was viewing it. So it can definitely get a little bit muddy. Yeah. But that's up to me. I get to determine who I'm in relationship with. I get to determine who I choose to have contact with outside of a session.
I would just imagine, like, even I've had boyfriends that have had a greater expectation of what is happening. Like, I've had that experience. It feels like I've had similar experiences with boyfriends where now, like, it's just, it's such an interesting topic to me. Like, someone is paying for their time with you, and then there's that expectation that they're in a relationship with you. Like, I feel like it's just like added layers.
And they're not just paying for my time, they're paying to be vulnerable with me. Right. We've already talked. BDSM is incredibly intimate in nature. Yeah. And vulnerable. Yeah. So I think when a client comes to me with all of the shame of identifying as being submissive, and they connect with a dominant woman in scene where we're playing and we're exploring and we're spending time together, and sometimes clients will pay me for my time to take me out for dinner just because they want to chat or they want to continue that dynamic outside of the dungeon. Then that's where expectations get fuzzy on their part.
Yes, it
right?
is.
On my part, this is my job. This is not my sex slave. I am not I'm not emotionally vested in clients. I care about their well-being.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that they're safe. I want to make sure that
that they're looked after.
That they're looked after. But for me, it's always a professional relationship.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah. I think it's also interesting because, like, back to what you were saying about, like, clients are really, like, it's a very vulnerable position to be in. And I can only imagine, especially for a male that is submissive, it's a stigma, that in itself. And so for them to be with someone who doesn't judge them for being submissive, that's probably what they
encourages them to be submissive.
Like, it's a safe space. Like, you provide a safe space for them to be who they are without feeling bad for it. Or whatever punishment or humiliation or degradation you do is all within that consented relationship. But you are the one person that sees them for who they are.
Exactly. And you're the one person giving them what they desire.
Yeah.
Where perhaps, their spouse shames them for their inclinations, if they even have the courage to disclose their inclinations to their partner. And it's really interesting. And I've always said, that pro-domming isn't sex in the traditional way that we know, like, as being like vaginal, penis, penetrative sex. But there is a sexual charge to it, or there is for my clients anyways. I think even if someone wants to just come and clean my floors, they do it with an erection because it's sexually arousing for them. Yeah. To be in that submissive space. It's sexually charged.
And then you give them that space. That is also part of it. So they're being vulnerable. You're giving them you're giving them allowance to be the way they want to be. And then on top of that,
you're accepting and you're validating. And I think even just talking about it now, like, it's completely understandable that they would form attachment to their mistress.
Yeah.
And also, and here's another piece of it is, if a man identifies as I've always said, like, if I could, make dominant women, whatever, in a factory, like, I would be loaded. Like, every submissive, man who identifies as being submissive. And I just want to clarify too, not all my clients identify as being submissive.
Okay.
Right. I see fetishists. I see people who are just exploring. Like, it's such a variety of clients, but clients who I see who do feel like they are submissive and that is their design. And that is that is the dynamic they want to explore. The amount of men who have asked me, like, how can I find a dominant partner?
Yeah.
How can I find a dominant wife? Like, my goodness.
That's so sad.
It is a little bit sad. Because it's not real. Like, it's rare. It's a rare find. I've worked with couples. Oh my gosh. I work with this beautiful couple. They're in a cuckold relationship, and I think they met online and they fell in love, completely vanilla, and they got married and had 2 kids. And he's like, by the way, like, I'm a cuckold.
That took some time to say.
Well, it's tough.
It is.
It's hard.
Oh, yes. Oh, I know.
Right?
Especially like a submissive male.
It's so, exactly. And all the stigma and all the shame that comes with that, right? Yeah. And he got fucking lucky because she was all about it, and they're in a female-led relationship, and they're in a cuckold relationship.
Oh, amazing.
And he is just living his dream. And I tell him every time I work with this couple, I'm like, do you have any idea how lucky you are? And he does know, but that is such a rarity. Yeah. That doesn't happen.
I can imagine.
Right? It is tough. And there are so many submissive men who just want a dominant woman. And it's a hard find. So, and that's what keeps me in business.
Yeah.
Quite honestly,
That's
right?
true.
Like if women were doing this in their personal life, or wives were open to this and exploring this in their marriages and in that sexual dynamic,
Yeah.
there would be no, I'd be out of business, right? There's a reason why this service is valuable and that it exists, because it does kind of validate some of these inclinations that can't be explored elsewhere. And that is my job, is to create that safe, non-judgmental space for people to explore.
Because I have always identified, or I've always thought myself as submissive, and a good part of me now thinks and wonders if that's just because of how I was societally conditioned. Because I have probably dated some men who are more sensitive, and I consider myself alpha female. So I think these are also the problems, is like how we view things. So I've called myself alpha female in real life, but like sexually submissive.
Okay.
But if I see a man who is sensitive and emotional, I don't want to be with them. And so when I was younger, I would just be like completely turned off. I'd be so interested in someone, and then they would get a little bit emotional. I'm like, nope, don't want this. I can't be with someone who's so emotional. And I only viewed it as negative. And then it wasn't until I think last year I started talking to someone online, and he identified as submissive, and I was just so like, I was at that point now where I'm like, okay, let me talk to you more about it. I usually would be like, nope. Now I'm like, no, I'm curious about this. So we talked a lot about it and what it means to be submissive, and that conversation of just having like a real conversation with someone about it made me change the way I saw things, and made me realize that like through what we see on television, through what we see with our family and friends, just everywhere, that there's like this certain dynamic of like strong men, slightly weaker women, or like behind every strong man is a strong woman. Like just even that thing alone, we have been conditioned to see men in a certain way, and men have been conditioned almost to see women in a different way. So that when you have a sensitive man or a submissive man, it's almost looked at as a weakness, but it's really not. So is
sensitive and emotional synonymous with submissive?
No, I'm not going to say it is, but I think that I kind of put it all together.
That's feminine. We do consider that to be feminine energy, right?
Yeah.
Being emotionally minded is associated with feminine energy and submissive energy.
Yeah.
And being logical is associated with masculine energy.
Yeah, so I think that's what I was doing.
Yeah,
I was
that makes
immediately
sense.
associating
and that
the
is
two
the
together.
way that we have been socialized.
Yeah, and I get so nervous. Like I'm very dominant in every other way. When people find out I'm submissive, they're completely like confused, because I don't know how to be dominant in the bedroom. Like I feel so intimidated with a man.
Well, because you probably need the break.
Well, that too.
Right? Like you, and I think that's very common for the clientele that I see.
I agree with that, yeah.
Right? They're head of the household. They're running businesses. They're successful. They're doing all the things. They're
looking
coaching,
after the kids and all that.
Hockey, whatever it may be, right? Yeah. They're always on. And then they're looking for that opportunity to just not make the decisions for a couple hours.
Yeah.
Just not having to tell someone what to do, like flipping that script.
I agree with you. That's why I like it.
And a lot of clients who come see me, really, they're just looking for a vacation. A lot of times, like that's, at the end of a session, like, thanks. Like, I feel like I just had a vacation. Or I just had a spa day.
That's amazing.
Right?
Yeah.
And that is the reason that they hire me and they want to have a session, is they just, and I'll even start, I start with a little bit of mindfulness at the beginning of a session, and I do some deep breathing, and I'll say things like, all of the anxiety, or of all of the thoughts that you had coming into the session, I want you just to release that. Right? Nothing else matters for the next 2 hours or 3 hours or 90 minutes, whatever the session time is. Yeah. Like the only thing that matters is being present. Yeah. And surrender. Yeah. Surrendering to me. And if you have a thought about work come up, I want you just to float it down the river and let that go. Right? I do like a lot of mindfulness kind of stuff at the beginning to kind of get into that headspace. Yeah. Because that is what they're looking for a lot of the time, is just not to be in charge.
Yeah. But then you also meet men that are like, they want a woman to be in control. Like I've had like, they just push me against the wall, do something. Like they kind of want that to be taken away from them too then.
Okay. Well, and as a submissive, like you identify as submissive, you know how hot that is.
I do.
Right. So I totally get it. Like, even just the idea of being tied up and used sexually, it's fucking hot.
Yeah.
Right? Just having no control and being whatever.
It is.
Whatever things, like it's exciting. So I can totally understand why a man would want to have that experience.
And I think more men want it more than they say.
Tied up and stimulated. Well, I then
also just get really intimidated because then I'm just, if I'm talking about myself being dominant, how do I be so forceful? But then also, then I get nervous about hurting them too much. And then I get worried that it's going to be, I'm not caring more about what they like. The intuition, I guess, isn't there for me.
To care.
But
that's why you have a safe word. Right?
Yeah,
that's why you always have a safe word.
You do.
And it takes practice.
That's the problem. I haven't flexed that muscle enough.
Exactly. 100%. It takes experience and practice.
Yeah.
Like how far I can push someone now and not care compared to you were talking learning curve. Oh my gosh. Like if there was one little whimper or one little twitch back in my early days, I would stop and check in.
Right.
Right. Whereas now I'm like, yeah, it's okay to cry. You know, everyone needs to cry sometimes, you know, and you keep going, or like, you know, it's good practice to stop. If your intuition is like, wow, I'm really pushing here. They're really having a strong response to what I'm doing.
Yeah.
You check in and you're like, just as a reminder, your safe word is red.
Right.
You know,
that's fair.
Doing the check-in and, you know, just making sure that they understand what their safe, you know, their safe sign or safe word is, and then I've done my due diligence and then I can continue, right? But yeah, they want to be pushed.
Yeah, I forget.
Especially the pain sluts, right? There are masochists.
Yeah.
That is under the umbrella of BDSM, and that does exist, right? Where
masochists are those that like getting pain inflicted onto them.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
And that definitely is a common theme.
That is.
Yeah.
It also was one of those things where I remember getting like whipped for the first time, and it hurts. It hurts
ambitious.
So much. I know.
I'm so impressed with you right now. Oh my God.
But it was one of those, and it's being present. That's also like a big thing, because I think a lot of people get caught up in their own head when they're having sex because it's so intimate and vulnerable. But then you're getting whipped and it hurts so much. But then like if you just take that breath in and out, and then you just kind of, and it's weird to say this, but you succumb to it.
Yeah. And the
feels
surrender.
So good.
And
surrendering.
Yeah, surrendering. And that's, well, and probably because it takes like 8 to 10 minutes for those endorphins to start kicking in.
Yeah.
Right. So you're probably like, oh my God, this hurts. And then like your endorphins start dumping. You're like, oh, yeah, this is actually really good. Right. Yeah. And then there's a psychological part of that too, where you're like, I'm going to take this because it pleases my dominant.
Yeah.
And they're not going to stop until they're done. And I have no choice but to take what they want to give me. And that is like the sexy part of the power exchange.
So then I'm curious, like, how has this kind of, like, has this bled your professional life? Has that bled into your private life? Or, I mean, you've mentioned being a mother, like how has like raising your kids, being in the sex industry, the stigma that may be behind it, being a mother, or even just like the nature of your work, how you date, how, like, have you noticed any kind of negative or even positive effects or impacts into your personal life?
Good question. So I know I listened to a recent podcast that you did where you were talking about the clusterfuck that is online dating.
Yes.
So take that clusterfuck and then add on, oh, by the way, kink is really important to me in my personal sex life.
Right.
Oh, and I make my full-time income from being alone in a dungeon with naked men.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, definitely has been challenging when I was dating. And you know what I think has been the most challenging? You know, we've talked about the stigma when I was dating and when I was online and meeting people and trying to connect and, you know, form a relationship. One of the biggest obstacles is that people make assumptions about you based on your career.
Yeah.
Right? If you tell someone you're a nurse, oh, you must be such a sweet soul. If you tell someone you're an engineer, oh, you must be so smart and logical. We make assumptions about people based on their career choice, right? That's what we do.
Yep.
And, oh, what do you do for work is one of the first questions that we ask people in North American culture, right?
Agreed,
because what you do is more important than who you are. Anyway, it's typically, right?
Yeah, no, it's a very common question.
It's a very common question. So when you're dating and you haven't met someone, and I want to be authentic. So the biggest challenge that I have experienced is that potential dates make assumptions about who I am based on my job.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Right? Because what is a stereotype of a dominatrix? We've already talked a little about this at length, right? That I'm mean, that I'm cruel, or they assume that I'm dominant in my personal life. Yeah. And they're like, oh, but I'm not a submissive. I don't think I'm your type.
Do you get any of the sex worker kind of stigma, shame with that too?
I'm sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah. I just don't know if anyone said that too, or you've had those conversations.
I've gone on dates and, and I try to hold off the, oh, what do you do question as long as possible. Right. So I can actually have a chance to meet someone and be my glorious self for like a date or two before like giving them the spiel and the speech of this is what I do professionally. Yeah. And I've gotten that down pat. I can imagine you. And yeah, I've gone on dates and connected, and they'd be like, and then I tell them what I do and kind of talk a bit about that, and they're like, I'm not going to be okay with that, so and that's the I guess plus side of being upfront, when dating, and that like it weeds them out. It does, right? Because I need a certain kind of partner, and here's the truth. The truth is expecting a partner to be okay with everything that I do professionally is a big fucking ask. Telling a partner that I'm going to go do an overnight at my client's cottage across the border. And I have my own suite and I have my own space, but I'm going to be there all night alone at a cottage. It's a big ask. Or even just, I'm going to be seeing hundreds of naked men throughout, the course of my year. Expecting someone to be 100% okay with that, like, it's a huge fucking ask, and I recognize that.
But I guess it's also one of those things where, some people ask you what you do, and then you may talk about some things, but no one really asks you really what you do or get into the specific, like the specificities of what you do. And truthfully, like what you do when you're working is your own business.
True. Do you know what? I find the flip side. If I tell somebody what I do, they're super intrigued.
Oh, of course.
Right? And like, oh my God, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Right? That's always the first response.
Right.
Because, I don't want to tell hairdressers what I do because like I am such an introvert too, right? So like, I don't want to talk.
Right. And you're getting your hair cut to escape everything else at the time.
Yeah. Right. So the massage therapist, and I don't, there's a lot of different reasons why I don't tell people what I do, but like a huge reason I don't tell people what I do is because like, oh my God, that's so cool. Tell me all about it. I don't want to. I'll do it for Shelly on a podcast, but that is like it. Right. Like,
I wish that people would be okay with it a little bit more. And it's not so much like, I think to an extent it's a little bit of a novelty to meet someone who's in the sex industry, like a pro dom, someone who's getting, I don't know, for some reason I just think of it as like a cool, like it's
glamorous.
Just I do.
There's a glamorous,
it is
stereotype.
And so I wish that we were at this point where like we could talk about it a little bit more, and then people are like, oh yeah, okay, that's just normalized, or maybe not normalized, but it's okay, cool.
And I think we're getting there. We talked about the next generation and consent. I feel like there is a shift.
Yeah. I would also think that you being a mother, the way that you would raise your children would be more open, possibly more inclusive.
Definitely open. Probably too open. Right? There's no book on how to parent as a sex worker.
Right.
Right. And when they start asking, like I said, 10 years, I've been doing this for like a significant part of my children's lives. So there's no book on, how to answer certain questions. I'm all on my own here trying to figure this stuff out. Right.
Right.
And I don't want to promote shame. And I want to be honest, but of course that has to be age appropriate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
But it does teach, I mean, but it's also like a form of sex education to your kids as well. You would know best on how to, like, what are the things that you wish you knew is what you would teach your kids almost, I would imagine. Or
I have no idea. Let's
fine.
do this again in 10 years when they're grown and like, because I haven't.
I just think that the more open and inclusive parents are, it teaches, it fosters that kind of space in the household for their kids when they're raising them.
So.
And I think that's also a large reason why things are changing, because we're having more open conversations.
Yes.
We're allowing conversations like that to exist. It's not like you can't talk about this or you're going to get spanked or something like that.
Of course. Even with sex work, you know, when I first started doing this professionally, sex work wasn't real work.
Yeah. I don't,
or no
I
one
think
was
there's a lot of
even-
people that think that way still.
Sure, of course.
Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got a lot of work to do still, and a lot of,
Right.
yeah, we have a ways to go. You know, the idea that women can make money however they choose and women can make choices for their body. And of course, not all sex workers are women, so I should, you know,
But
be
people are
careful
willing
with
to
what I'm
pay
saying.
for it. Why is it a bad deal that people are
Right.
taking that money and using it for what they need it for?
And a lot of people make their income using their bodies.
Yeah.
Sports stars use their bodies to make money.
Right. That's glorified.
Movers.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, people who have moving companies use their bodies to make their income. Most people use their body. But
Right.
then we have an association when there's pleasure
Right.
involved or there's a sexual exchange.
Right.
Then that kind of changes our idea of it, right?
Yeah. I know this is not on the same topic, but I was just, because of the whole overturning abortion in the States, I've been hearing that porn stars are wanting to use condoms again because they're scared of getting pregnant because they might not get abortions. So it's also like that whole aspect of it too, where you want to do whatever you want with your own body. It's your body, your choice. But then there's also certain other caveats that come into play because other aspects are getting regulated or restrictive.
Sure.
So that it is, I don't know, is it illegal in it's not, it can't be illegal in Canada for sex work, but
Technically it is.
And so there are some regulations or things that you have to look out for.
The laws are written in a way that do not.
Okay.
It's not decriminalized.
Right.
Yeah. Even BDSM, the law was changed recently to include that if you harm somebody even with their consent, it's illegal. If you put someone in bondage even with their consent, it's illegal. So that was changed very recently, like a couple years ago.
That just...
Even like with written consent.
Yeah.
And that's not just professionally. Like this is at home too.
Yeah.
Like if you tie up your wife in the bedroom with her consent.
Yeah.
It's illegal. Technically.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And the laws have changed a lot. Like since I even started 10 years ago, I know when I first started, body houses were made legal. And the idea was that they didn't want sex workers working on the street. They wanted them to be able to work in a house so that for safety, right? To get them off of the street.
Yeah.
And then that was changed not too long after that. And we all know about SESTA and FOSTA and Backpage being taken down. And, you know, things are always shifting legally.
Right. It's weird that there's some progress being made and then there's a lot of stuff that gets taken back 10 years. I always find it really interesting that North America considers itself such a free country, and there's like, we have all these freedoms, but we don't really have that many freedoms in some cases.
Absolutely. So true.
Yeah.
We're not European.
No.
Like I think sometimes Canadians pretend like
I think
that we're European. We're not.
Not at all.
Not
No.
at all. The
We're
culture,
much more
we're
prudish.
so conservative.
Yeah.
Actually.
I have a question though for you.
Okay.
What is the or are there like the craziest requests, or like I'm so curious now, like some of the crazier things that have happened over the 10 years of your work?
So crazy is a relative term.
That's true. Yeah. Okay, for you, what are the things that stand out, I guess, the most?
I feel like at this point in my career, I've heard it all, but then from time to time, I'll get a request from like, oh, okay, like that's a little bit different. And I don't know, like, something that I find really fascinating, and this is a fetish, is like crushing, like bug crushing. Have you heard of this, Shelley?
No.
Like where a client just wants to watch you step on bugs and crush them, or like even I've had like a request, like they want, oh my God, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I've had a request, and in preparation for this podcast, I actually have an email file that's titled ridiculous requests.
Okay, good, great.
And so from time to time, like I'd be like, this is so silly or whatever, like this is just so like outside of the box.
Yeah.
I'm just going to throw it in that, folder. And then, you approach me. I'm like, oh, great. I can just pull the folder and kind of like refresh my memory. So yeah, a request of, I want to bring in my pet goldfish and watch you step on it with heels or bare feet while I beg you to save their life.
Oh.
Yeah.
I wonder what would make someone want that.
Yeah. I've also had, and I say no to these, right? I just feel like I need to clarify. I'm super open-minded, but I'm also pretty traditional in my BDSM approach. And that's not my career.
Yeah.
I'm not stepping on gross.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I know.
Or
I don't understand it, but it then makes me think about it.
I had a request. He wanted to bring in a picture of his mom and watch me step on it. And so, we talk, in BDSM that it needs to be safe, sane, and consensual.
Right.
That's kind of, the mantra of BDSM.
Yeah.
So I'm always evaluating that. Is that a sane request? No.
Right.
Not in my opinion, it's not.
Yeah.
We've added on in BDSM culture to the safe, sane, consensual, where we often talk about RAC. Okay. So RAC stands for risk aware consensual kink. So for example, nailing someone's balls to a wooden board, let's say with a hammer and a nails, which is something that happens, that might not be considered safe or sane. Right. So then we implement RAC, where the client is aware of the risk of the activity that we're doing, and they're still consenting to doing that.
Okay.
Well, even whipping somebody.
Yeah.
That might not seem safe.
Right.
Doing needle play or stapling a cock or whatever, might take place. These kind of more extreme, forms of play may not sound safe or sane. So then, we implement RAC.
Okay.
I had a recent role play request asking to role play that the world was invaded by fembot aliens. Okay. And he wanted me to role play a fembot alien that took over the universe, and they're enslaving all of the men on the planet. And I'm just like, okay, creative.
Yeah, it is.
But no thanks. Like, let's role play slave mistress. Like,
but that's essentially the same thing.
I guess it is, but I don't know.
I know. I get from your perspective.
Right, like it's so fascinating, all of it. I will tell you a little funny story. I like to share this story. I did have a client. This is a couple years ago. It was his first session with me. It was his first session ever. And he came up into the studio. Things were progressing normally. He removed his shirt. I put a collar on him. And he was quite young. I would say he was probably early 20s.
Okay.
Late teens, early 20s. And we just have the shirt off, the jeans are on, the collar's on. I put a leash on his collar. I could tell that he was nervous. He was really anxious. He was shaking. I'm like, okay, let's take some time, have a glass of water, just kind of ease into this.
Yeah.
And then as soon as I put the leash on, he's like, my lady, can we take a break? And I'm like, a break from what? Like nothing's happened.
Yeah.
Right. He's like, my lady, I need to go to the washroom. So he runs to the washroom and he vomits.
Okay.
And then he comes out and he lays on my couch. And this is like right within the first 10 minutes of the session.
Right.
And so he's just like lying on my couch, like comatose. And I'm like, okay, this is like a first for me. So I'm kind of checking in. Like, are you okay? Are you like, is this nerves? Are you ill? Like, what's kind of happening? And so for like the next hour, it was just kind of alternating between napping on my couch and running and throwing up.
Oh no.
Finally, he discloses to me that he arrived early. He was very nervous. So he smoked pot.
Right.
For his first time ever.
First time ever.
First time ever.
No.
Why he thought that was a good idea?
Yeah.
I have no idea. So he disclosed that. And like, I don't know.
Guy.
Poor guy, right? So literally I stayed an hour after the session time ended.
Right.
And he slept through the entire time. Most expensive nap he has ever had. Right. And we got to the point in the session where, like, you know, in my head, I'm like, I need to leave now. Like, if I don't leave in the next 5 minutes, I'm not going to pick up my kids from school on time. Like, my day is done. We were supposed to be finished an hour ago.
Yeah.
He's sleeping. And I'm just like sitting there in my PVC and whatever, catching up on emails, doing whatever while kind of like patting his head and giving him little sips of water. Finally at the end, I'm just like, I'm sorry, you have to go and you have to go now. Like, this is, you know, it's time. Like, I was getting a little agitated by that time. I'm not going to lie. Right. Because he was done and, you know, that was his choice and I can have empathy for that. But at the same time, come on, like, let's go. Right. So he does get up. I give him a bottle of water. I give him a bag and, you know, in case he's going to throw up some more, and he runs out of the dungeon. He opens the door. As he's going down the stairs, he calls up to me. He's like, my lady, can I see you tomorrow? And I'm like, just go home. Right? Just go home, please. Like, go take care of yourself. Like, I'm like, I don't know. Like, just go home. Email me. You when you're in a better headspace, right?
Right.
And he did. He followed up with me, and it was a beautiful email. I think it started with, my lady, I am sorry for desecrating your toilet. I am sorry for wasting your time. I am sorry for the choice. You know, he was very apologetic and like, I did have a heart for him, to be honest. So I did see him again.
Okay.
And he did clean my toilet.
Oh, that's so nice of him. I like that. Yeah. At least make up for it.
So anyways.
Well, I guess that's when sex, drugs, and money don't go well together. The only other question I had was, a lot of what we talk about today and about what you do in the nature of BDSM, and working with submissives, is that, like, I feel like we live in these traditional gender roles. And I'm curious from someone who, I mean, there's a slight jealousy factor from me with you, in that, like, you own your dominant side and you are really good at it. And I wish I could be like that more, but, you have to have some kind of insight, or I feel like there might be some insight from you into, you know, what these traditional gender roles mean to people, what they could, like, the negative, or I would say probably more the negative effect that they have on people and on, like, relationships. I'm curious if you have any, not advice, but just insight into, I don't know, I don't want to say help, but maybe foster better sexual relations between two people with submissive or dominance, how men and women look at each other when it comes to sex. Only because you, as a dominant woman, being with a submissive man, sees a different side to men than I think most of us do. And because you're so open to it, and because that's what you do, like, it's part of your job and how you see the world a little bit. It has to be different to how the rest of us see the world. I don't know if that's a very loaded question.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure exactly how to answer. Something I have learned about men, I don't know if this is answering your question, but something I've learned about men doing this professionally is men are far more insecure
yes,
than we realize.
Yeah.
And men suffer with body image issues just as much as women, and insecurities and self-loathing and lack of confidence. Like, when you see a man in a submissive state, in the vulnerable situations that we've been talking about, all of that comes up. Right? Or I have clients who are like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm so overweight, or, oh, I've gained X amount of pounds since seeing you last. And of course, I'm not going to notice that. Right. Because I'm not viewing him that way, nor do I necessarily care. Right. Or what they look like, right? Or how much they weigh. Yeah. But you know, the same way that a woman's like, you know, sees her best friend, oh, I've gained 5 pounds, or I gained 10 pounds since the last family picnic. Like, we're always kind of like justifying that. Men do have that internal conversation,
But they probably don't have that conversation
But
out
they
loud.
repress it, but they don't have that conversation out
Okay,
loud.
so we're going to say the same thing. Great.
Yeah.
I love that. That's really, yeah.
And you know what, too? Something to consider, and I always think about this, like when we talk about traditional gender roles, we're using that term from a Gen X perspective.
Right.
So I'm really careful now, even when I say, men this or women this, because that doesn't really exist anymore.
I know. I have to remind myself that too.
Right. And that's me having a teenager and my teenager's partner being trans.
Yeah.
And me having to watch my pronouns at home or watching my assumptions of girls this and boys this.
Right.
It's like, it's such a shift. So even, this idea but what we're talking about is traditional gender roles, and that does exist.
I think more because of what society puts on us.
In society, right? And for, my generation and older and our parents' generation, that definitely exists.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, I think, some takeaways like we've already talked about, just the importance of communication with your partner.
Yeah.
And just, we're all, I think, working on being less judgmental of ourselves. And, there's so much talk about self-love and self-acceptance and just carrying that over to our sexual preferences, maybe, right? Like just self-love of who we are sexually and not judging our inclinations and just getting really curious about our sexual inclinations and not being afraid to explore. I've had like 70 and 80-year-old clients who come to me for their first session and say like, I've been thinking about this my whole life, and they wait till 70 or 80, mostly because it wasn't available in the way that it is now, right? Like in the past, but just like take that risk and explore.
Yeah.
Right. And take that risk and communicate with your partner.
Yeah, it's communication.
What's the worst that can happen?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the one thing I've learned is like exploration. I've learned things about myself too. Like I'm a very sensory based person, and I've learned that because I love sensory deprivation so much.
Okay.
So I was just like, that's a really interesting that sex taught me. Who knew?
Yeah. There's so many, and there
has to be
so much, right? I think a lot of couples get so pigeonholed into how they define sex or sexuality with their partner, and there's so much to explore.
There really is. You're never done exploring.
You're never done exploring.
Yeah,
let's all just keep working on that stigma, keep working on that shame, keep working on that consent.
Yeah, because I find that when people shame you, they're more offended at themselves, or they're more offended at how they feel about it. It's not actually about what it is. How can I plug you? How can we find you? Or if anyone wanted to rent the studio?
Yeah. So my website is just my name, ladyazelle.com. And that's where you can find out more about me and the services I offer. And as far as dungeon rental, it is torontodungeonrental.com.
It's a very nice space too.
Offering Toronto's most elegant BDSM play spaces. So check it out.
Well, thank you very much for coming on to my podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate it. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. Thanks, you too.
I would like to thank you for tuning in today. Download, leave a review, follow, and share this episode and the podcast with your friends, family, really whomever you like. You can find me on Just Curiosity Pod on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and you can email me at justcuriositypod@gmail.com, as I would absolutely love to know your thoughts, insights, comments, and all those juicy stories. But most of all, stay curious, friends. I'm Shelly D, and this has been Just Out of Curiosity.